So I guess just to like sum up, if you're a content producer, which obviously most of you are, you will hear a lot about this in the coming months and potentially years. The semantic web, which we talked about earlier, is coming, and this is a key part of it, how we can help major platforms understand the relationship between the stuff that you write and who you are and what your expertise are. You'll probably see people trying to sell services around this and all that sort of stuff, especially around like authorship, because it involves coding, and anything that involves coding you can start to make money off because everyone's scared of it, which is ridiculous. But I would say don't worry about it too much. This is it's a change, but it's just it's in sort of major platforms' interest to keep it as simple as possible and to keep it as close to the best practices of marketing as possible. So if you carry on doing what you're doing, but you just appreciate the fact that search engines aren't humans, they can't figure stuff out themselves, you have to sort of operate within their boundaries, like operate in Google Plus so that Google can collect data about what you do, that kind of thing. As long as you're aware of that, you'll be okay, I think. And so the two big takeaways are claim authorship of stuff that you've written, and think about how you might be able to build your author rank by hanging out in the right places. If there's any questions at all, happy to speak afterwards in the bar. Put your hands down because I don't want to answer in public.
There's a question time now.
Okay, so I will have a few questions which I will immediately pass on to Stuart. And that's about it. Yeah.
Anybody got any questions?
Oh, brilliant. The SEO at the back.
So what if you are an expert in 5 things?
I think there's clearly that's going to happen a lot, and it's not, I don't know, I don't want to, it's very hard to give out advice about this topic without scaring someone for some reason, but it's not particularly going to matter. There's nothing to say that you can't be an expert in more than one subject, as long as you're contributing in each of those subjects and you have a place within the community for each of those 5 subjects. That's important. The thing is that I think the main point we're trying to make is don't presume that you can be writing about hundreds and hundreds of different topics, because it's not possible to be an expert in that many topics and expect yourself to be ranking really, really well when there's people in each of those individual topics who only focus on that and who have much, much more expertise. I think the sort of long-term outcome of this change will be that whenever you search for like quite a niche topic, you'll find yourself connected to content by the best people in that niche much quicker than you are currently. So I mean, this is just on anecdotal experience, but when you start investigating in it, I work in an agency, so I have to get to grips with areas that I've had no experience with previously quite regularly. And when I start to get to grips with those areas, at the moment it's going to take me a little while to understand who the major players are and stuff like that. Search engines are trying to get you to a point where you can be put in touch with content by those real experts from the first time you search, because it's those guys that are going to be appearing near at the top for the kind of stuff that you're searching. So if you're into 5 things, that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to accept that if you only spend like a small amount of time discussing one of those 5, unless your content is really, really valuable to that community, you're probably not going to be visible in search results for that topic, whereas you may be for the ones where you spend much more time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But then, do you advise one profile throughout the 5 domains, or do you advise 3 profiles?
No, I'd advise one. I think if you're going to use Google Plus, Google Plus is pretty clear on its guidelines. It says if you are a person, you build a Google Plus profile for yourself, and you can talk about anything that you're interested in. It would be madness for Google to suggest that we should each have a different profile for each of our interests, because I mean, it would be loads of work for us personally, and no one would adopt it. And it'd be hard for Google, because it wouldn't be able to understand the relationship between your 3 individual profiles. Are you the same person? Are you 3 different people? Difficult. I think the main thing to do is follow the advice that they give you, because they're the guys setting the rules at the end of the day, and have one profile and be involved in the topics that you're passionate about and you're writing about.
Cheers.
for a bit of clarity, really, I was under the impression that if you wanted to link to content you may have produced that isn't on a domain that you have an email address for, that you had to prove that you're a contributor by submitting an email address that you have that's assigned to that
No,
domain.
that's not true. So I write for Gus's website, I write for Search Engine Watch, I write for loads of websites. If I submit, you have to get those guys to do a little bit of work for you if you don't own the site. They have to put in the little bit of code that Stu said at the top. Usually they can get a little dynamic solution so that they can, if you tell them what your Google Plus page is, they can just put that in and then it remembers you on their content management system. And as long as you go back to your Google Plus profile, go to edit profile, and then go to the contributor section and say, I've contributed to all these pages or these domains, you should be fine.
So, yeah, okay, cool.
You don't need to have an email address for that domain.
Go over to this side first, I'll come back to you. I haven't looked, but I was wondering, is there a WordPress plugin to help facilitate internet code?
Yeah. So I haven't. I'm currently not blogging myself, but I know that there are. Like there's Google Plus and Authorship integration plugins for WordPress.
It can be as easy as copy and pasting your Google Plus URL.
Stu, the guy who does this, knows. Yeah, there's a load of simple ways to do this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I'll go over there about.
So I work for an agency and we write content for lots of different companies.
Yep.
Have you had any, we've never tried it before, but using the publisher relation instead of
so rel
authorship?
equals, well, now we're getting right into it. So Stu showed you earlier that there is rel equals author, so the relationship between the Google Plus URL and the piece of content is that you're an author. You can also claim to be a publisher. So Google Publisher, rel equals publisher tends to be more for brands, and that's where you say, as a brand, we publish this content. You can also, that's a great way, so rel equals publisher is fantastic if people are searching your brand and you want to take over that entire right-hand side of the search engine results page with your logo and some pictures and some information about, basic information about your brand, blocks out other people doing paid search on your brand terms. Rel equals publisher is fantastic for that. Rel equals publisher is not intended for individuals to claim individual pieces of content that you should be using rel equals author for that. But it does, yeah, rel equals publisher is a solution for brands. And you need obviously you need a brand Google Plus profile page to link to that.
Company page.
Yeah, a brand Google Plus page.
An obvious way that organizations can benefit from Google Author Rank is by harnessing the power of their staff's Google Plus profiles, but that opens a big can of worms for a lot of organizations, doesn't it, in terms of transparency.
How do you mean?
So people like plus one.
Yeah, so it's the same, but that's exactly the same thing that we've been through with Facebook. You were able to set up a Facebook Google Plus. I'm confusing myself. You're able to set up a Facebook page for your brand. I mean, that's been around for ages. And do work send you emails saying everyone in the office has to like our Facebook page? It happens a bit. I mean, I've had my massively out-of-date boss saying you need to like my video on that I've put on my new website. It's like, well, no, I don't. But it's not created it's not created critical mass of litigation or anything like that, has it? And I think it will be exactly the same story as we saw with Facebook and Twitter. If you want to associate yourself with your company, you can, but if you're forced to, you're going to have a pretty strong position to stand up in court and say, I don't really like that.
Hi.
Hi.
In terms of older content,
yeah.
If you had quite a dramatic career shift, kind of you're writing about one thing and then suddenly you're writing about a completely different area, is it still worth linking to that older content, or does it have to be stuff you're writing about currently?
No, it's definitely worth claiming authorship of stuff that you've written about, even if you've shifted your, even if you've shifted careers completely. The thing is if that content is still adding value to the community it's aimed at, it will still rank for terms that people are searching, and therefore there is still an opportunity for your face and your connections to appear next to it. That's no problem. It may even be that we start to see people who do this for their old content start to re-engage with communities that they left behind a while back. There's no reason not to do it.
Good, thanks.
One more question?
Yeah, give it the guy who's from us.
Thank you. I have to make bloggers famous in the finance industry. And so they get quoted a lot. We punt them out and we make sure that they're in lots of different places as a quote, and then they'll get back to them as soon as possible. How much authorship can we claim when they've been quoted or interviewed when like 90% is theirs, the authors? The journalist has just actually copied what they've said. I mean, what can we do to increase their authorship?
That's an interesting question. It is a bit of a wild west at the moment because let's say like Stu writes a piece of content and puts it on a website, but it's got a quote from me in it, and then Stu doesn't bother to mark it up with his authorship, and I go and mark it up with mine instead. Obviously, I've got to convince the person who's hosting that page to include my Google Plus URL in the rel equals author link at the top, which they might go, well, wait a minute, you're not the person who wrote it, Stu wrote it for me. So there's a built-in safety net there. But there is the potential for doing that. It's a bit of a wild west. So if you've contributed in terms of just a quote and authorship hasn't been claimed on a piece of content, you can claim it as your own. What I would say is, lessons learned from doing SEO is that if it feels dodgy, it might work for 6, 9, 12 months, but at some point in the future you will get your arse kicked by the search engine. So when Stu actually goes and tries to claim authorship on a piece of content and I've already claimed it, there will be some sort of report system in place, and all of a sudden I might find myself losing a whole load of author credibility because basically I've been claiming work that's not mine. So golden rule with search usually is, if it feels dodgy, don't do it.
Thank you.
Can you have two authors then on a piece of work?
Megatech.
What was that?
Can you associate two authors with one piece of content?
No.
There we go. Answered by the host.
Not yet.
Alright. Is that enough of a drilling? Can I get
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the